My name is Sophia Martinez, and I've lived in this desert town outside Phoenix for 15 years. Water isn't just precious here. It's everything. Without it, your garden dies, your pool's empty, and your monthly bills skyrocket into the thousands. So, when I noticed my water usage had mysteriously doubled over the past 6 months, I knew something was seriously wrong. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. It started innocently enough. My neighbor Derek moved in next door about 8 months ago. One of those guys who thinks his money can solve any problem and his charm can get him out of any situation. He had this perfect smile, always waved when he saw me working in my garden. Even brought me a bottle of wine when he first moved in. I thought he was just being neighborly. But then I got my water bill in March, and my stomach dropped. $468. For a single woman living alone in a modest 2-bedroom house, that was insane. I called the water company immediately, convinced there had to be some mistake. "No mistake, ma'am," the customer service rep told me in that bored voice they all have. "Your usage has been consistently high for the past several months. You might have a leak." A leak? That made sense. I hired a plumber the next day, a gruff old man named Pete who'd been fixing pipes in this town since before I was born. He checked every inch of my property, under the house, around the foundation, even dug up part of my front yard. Nothing. "Your pipes are solid as the day they were installed," Pete said, wiping his hands on a dirty rag. "If you've got a leak, it ain't on your property." That's when the paranoia started creeping in. I began watching my water meter obsessively, checking it 3 times a day. The numbers kept climbing even when I wasn't home. Even when I turned off my main water valve, somehow water was still being registered to my account. I spent weeks trying to figure it out. I'd wake up at random hours and peer through my blinds, looking for any sign of what might be causing this mysterious water usage. My sleep suffered, my work performance declined, and I started snapping at friends and family over nothing. This water bill was consuming my life. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Tuesday in late April, around 2 a.m. I'd gotten up to use the bathroom when I heard it, the sound of running water. Not from inside my house, but somewhere outside. I grabbed a flashlight and slipped out my back door, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The sound was coming from Derek's yard. I crept along the fence line, trying to stay in the shadows. Derek's house was dark, but there was definitely water running somewhere on his property. As I got closer to the corner where our yards met, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, hidden behind a decorative bush, was a garden hose. But this wasn't Derek's hose. I could see it snaking under the fence, disappearing into my yard. I followed it with my flashlight, my hands shaking with rage and disbelief. The hose was connected to my outdoor spigot, the one I rarely used, the one hidden behind my own bushes on the side of the house. Derek had somehow run a hose from my water supply under the fence and into his yard. He was watering his entire property, his massive lawn, his elaborate garden, even filling what looked like a hot tub, all with my water. I stood there in the darkness, staring at this blatant theft, and something inside me snapped. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about principle. This was about some entitled man thinking he could take advantage of a woman living alone. This was about months of stress, sleepless nights, and financial worry. All because Derek thought he was smarter than everyone else. But as I stood there, plotting my revenge, I heard something that chilled me to the bone. Footsteps. Someone was walking around Derek's yard, and they were coming my way. I clicked off my flashlight and pressed myself against the fence, barely breathing. Through a gap in the boards, I could see Derek walking around his yard in nothing but boxer shorts, checking his plants, adjusting sprinkler heads. He was admiring his handiwork, completely oblivious to the fact that I was watching him steal from me in real time. That's when I noticed something else. Derek wasn't alone. There was another figure moving around his yard, someone I couldn't quite make out in the darkness. They were working together, checking different areas of the property, making sure their theft operation was running smoothly. My neighbor wasn't just a thief. He was running some kind of organized operation. And as I watched them work, a plan began forming in my mind. A plan that would ensure Derek learned exactly what happens when you mess with the wrong woman. But I had no idea that my revenge would uncover something much darker than simple water theft. Something that would put my life in danger and reveal secrets about my neighborhood that I never could have imagined. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I knew exactly what I was going to do to Derek, and I knew it was going to destroy him completely. But first, I needed to gather evidence. Real, undeniable proof of what he'd been doing. I called in sick to work and spent the entire day preparing. I bought a security camera, waterproof and nearly invisible when properly positioned. I researched water laws in Arizona, property theft statutes, and utility fraud penalties. By the time the sun set, I was armed with everything I needed to take Derek down. But as I was setting up my camera that evening, hidden in the bushes near where the hose connected to my spigot, I heard voices from Derek's yard. Male voices, at least 3 of them, discussing something in hushed tones. I strained to listen, my heart racing as fragments of their conversation drifted over the fence. Been working perfectly for months. She has no idea. Next phase ready to go. Next phase? What next phase? This was bigger than I thought, and suddenly my simple revenge plan felt dangerously naive. That's when I realized I wasn't just dealing with a neighbor who was stealing water. I was dealing with something much more sinister, and I was about to find out just how deep this rabbit hole went. I crouched there in the darkness, my mind racing with possibilities. What did they mean by next phase? And why did Derek sound so confident that I had no idea what was happening? The arrogance in his voice made my skin crawl, but it also fueled something dangerous inside me. A burning need to not just expose him, but to completely humiliate him. Over the next few days, I became a woman obsessed. I documented everything. Took photos of the hose connection, recorded video of Derek using my water, even tracked the exact times when my water meter would spike. I created a detailed log of every gallon stolen, calculating that over 6 months, Derek had cost me nearly $3,000 in inflated water bills. But the more I watched, the more disturbed I became. Derek wasn't just watering his plants. He was running what looked like a small-scale irrigation business. I saw him meeting with other neighbors, showing them around his impossibly green lawn, taking what looked like payments. He was selling landscaping services, promising people the same lush results he'd achieved in his own yard, all while using my stolen water to make it happen. The audacity was breathtaking. This man was literally profiting off my theft, building a side business, on my dime while I struggled to pay bills that should have been a fraction of their actual cost. Every time I saw him smile and wave at me over the fence, knowing what I now knew, my anger grew into something cold and calculating. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. By Friday of that week, I had enough evidence to bury Derek legally. I could have called the police, the water company, even sued him for theft and fraud. But as I sat in my kitchen that evening, staring at the stack of documentation I'd compiled, I realized that legal consequences weren't enough. Derek had stolen more than water from me. He'd stolen months of peace, sleep, and financial security. He'd made me question my own sanity, doubt my ability to manage my own household. No, Derek deserved something more personal. Something that would teach him exactly what it felt like to be violated, to have someone take advantage of your trust and generosity. I wanted him to experience the same helplessness and frustration I'd endured, magnified tenfold. That night, I made a decision that would change both our lives forever. I started by researching Derek's background. Social media made it embarrassingly easy. The man documented his entire life online. I learned that he worked in sales for a high-end pool company, that he was recently divorced and paying substantial alimony, and that he'd moved to our neighborhood specifically because the HOA restrictions were minimal and water costs were supposedly manageable. Most importantly, I discovered that Derek was scheduled to host a major client party the following weekend. His Instagram was full of posts about this exclusive gathering he was planning, complete with professional catering and what he described as the most beautiful backyard oasis in the desert. He'd invited potential investors, his boss, even the ex-wife he was trying to impress with his newfound success. This party was clearly crucial to Derek's business aspirations and personal image, which made it the perfect target for my revenge. I spent the entire week preparing, and let me tell you, I was thorough. I researched everything from Arizona water law to the specific chemicals used in pool maintenance. I studied Derek's daily routine, noting when he left for work, when he returned, and when he typically did his yard work. I even befriended his housekeeper, a sweet older woman named Carmen, who was more than happy to chat about her employer's habits and schedule. By Thursday, I knew Derek's life better than he probably knew it himself. And more importantly, I knew exactly how to destroy everything he'd built with my stolen water. The beauty of my plan was its simplicity. Derek had gotten away with his theft for so long because he was careful, methodical, and smart about hiding the evidence. But his greatest strength would become his greatest weakness, because I was about to use that same careful planning against him in ways he never could have anticipated. Friday night, less than 24 hours before his big party, I put my plan into motion. I waited until Derek left for what Carmen had told me was his weekly poker game, something he never missed and that usually kept him out until well after midnight. Then I got to work. The first phase was psychological. I wanted Derek to feel unsettled, paranoid, like something was wrong, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what. So I made subtle changes to his perfectly maintained yard. I moved his garden decorations slightly, repositioned his outdoor furniture, even rearranged the hose he'd been using to steal my water. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make him question whether someone had been in his space. But that was just the beginning. The real devastation would come the next day, during his precious party, in front of everyone he was trying to impress. I was going to expose Derek's theft in the most humiliating way possible, and I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly what kind of man they were dealing with. As I slipped back into my house that night, my heart was pounding with anticipation. Derek had no idea what was coming for him. He'd spent months thinking he was outsmarting me, believing he could take advantage of a woman living alone. Tomorrow, he was going to learn that he'd picked the wrong neighbor to mess with. But as I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep from the adrenaline, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Voices in Derek's yard again, multiple people having what sounded like an urgent conversation. Through my bedroom window, I could see flashlights moving around his property, and the voices sounded angry, almost desperate. Something had gone wrong with their operation, and I realized that my small act of moving things around might have triggered something much bigger than I'd anticipated. My simple revenge plot was about to collide with whatever Derek and his partners were really doing, and I had a sinking feeling that I was in way over my head. The Water War, Part 2 Saturday morning arrived with the kind of blazing Arizona heat that makes your skin feel like it's cooking the moment you step outside. But I was already awake. Had been since 4 a.m., watching Derek's house through my bedroom blinds. The voices I'd heard the night before had me on edge, and I needed to know what I was really dealing with before I executed my revenge plan. What I saw in the early morning light made my stomach drop. Derek's yard wasn't just being maintained by him. There were at least 4 different men working on his property, setting up what looked like professional irrigation equipment. This wasn't some casual water theft anymore. This was organized, systematic, and way bigger than one neighbor stealing from another. I grabbed my binoculars and positioned myself at my kitchen window, which gave me the perfect view of Derek's backyard. Through the morning haze, I could see them installing what looked like a complex water distribution system. Multiple hoses, timers, even what appeared to be a filtration unit. These men worked with the efficiency of professionals, like they'd done this dozens of times before. That's when it hit me. Derek wasn't just stealing my water. He was the front man for some kind of water theft ring, probably targeting multiple properties throughout the neighborhood. My house was just one source in a much larger operation, and today's party wasn't just about impressing clients. It was about showcasing their system to potential new partners. The realization should have terrified me. Should have sent me running to the police with my evidence before things got any more dangerous. But instead, it filled me with a rage so pure and focused that my hands stopped shaking for the first time in days. These men thought they could run their operation right under my nose, steal thousands of dollars from hardworking people, and face no consequences. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. I spent the morning refining my plan, adapting it to this new reality. If Derek was running a bigger operation, then my revenge needed to be bigger too. I wasn't just going to embarrass him at his party. I was going to expose his entire criminal enterprise in front of everyone who mattered to him. By 10 a.m., guests were already starting to arrive for Derek's exclusive gathering. I watched from my window as expensive cars pulled up, men in tailored suits and women dripping with jewelry stepping out into the desert heat. Derek had clearly pulled out all the stops, professional servers, a bartender, even a small band setting up, near his pool. But the most interesting arrivals weren't the obvious party guests. 3 men in casual clothes had shown up separately, parking a block away and walking to Derek's house through the back alley. They looked like the same crew I'd seen working on his irrigation system, and they definitely weren't there to enjoy cocktails and small talk. At noon, just as the party was hitting its stride, I put my plan into motion. First, I called the water company's emergency line and reported a major leak at Derek's address. I made sure to mention that water was gushing everywhere and creating a dangerous situation for the neighbors. In the desert, water emergencies get immediate response. I knew they'd have a crew there within 30 minutes. Next, I called the HOA president, a strict woman named Mrs. Henderson, who took property violations personally. I reported that Derek was running an illegal business operation from his residence, complete with commercial-grade equipment and what appeared to be unlicensed contractors working on his property. But those were just the opening moves. The real devastation was about to begin. I had spent the previous evening preparing what I called my evidence packages, detailed photo documentation of Derek's theft, including timestamps, water meter readings, and financial calculations, showing exactly how much he'd stolen from me. But I hadn't just made one copy. I'd made 30, each one professionally bound and labeled with a bright red cover that read, Water Theft Operation, Evidence Package. At exactly 12:30, just as Derek was giving what looked like a presentation to his most important guests near the pool, I began my assault. I started by posting everything on social media, every neighborhood Facebook group, every local community forum, every platform where Derek's colleagues and neighbors might see it. I tagged Derek in every post, along with his company, his boss, and anyone else I could identify from his social media connections. The caption was simple but devastating. My neighbor Derek has been stealing water from my property for months to run his landscaping business. Here's the proof. Share this so others can protect themselves from this criminal. Within minutes, my phone was buzzing with comments, shares, and messages from neighbors who had experienced similar mysterious spikes in their water bills. It turned out Derek's operation was even bigger than I'd realized. He'd been targeting at least 6 different properties in our area, stealing thousands of gallons of water every month. But the social media exposure was just the beginning. At 12:45, right on schedule, the water company's emergency crew arrived at Derek's house. I watched from my window as two utility workers in bright yellow vests walked around Derek's property with detection equipment, tracing water lines and checking meters. The looks on Derek's guests' faces were priceless as these workers began digging up sections of the perfectly manicured lawn, following the trail of stolen water back to its sources. Derek tried to play it off, laughing nervously and telling his guests there must be some mistake. But when the utility workers discovered the elaborate hose system connecting my property to his irrigation setup, his casual confidence evaporated completely. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That's when Mrs. Henderson arrived, clipboard in hand and fury in her eyes. She took one look at the commercial-grade irrigation equipment, the obvious business operation being run from a residential property, and the water company workers documenting theft, and she went nuclear. "Derek Morrison," she announced in a voice that carried across 3 backyards. "You are in violation of at least 7 HOA regulations, and that's before we even address the apparent criminal activity taking place on your property." The timing was perfect. Derek's most important guests, including his boss and several potential investors, were witnessing their host being confronted by utility workers and the HOA president simultaneously. The professional presentation he'd been giving about his innovative landscaping solutions suddenly looked like what it really was: a pitch meeting for a criminal enterprise. But I wasn't done yet. As Derek scrambled to explain the situation to his increasingly uncomfortable guests, I made my final move. I walked out of my house, dressed in my best sundress, and carrying a pitcher of ice water and glasses on a tray. To anyone watching, it looked like I was simply being a thoughtful neighbor, bringing refreshments to the workers dealing with the emergency next door. But as I approached the crowd gathered around Derek's backyard, I made sure my voice carried clearly. "Oh, Derek, I'm so glad they finally found the source of my water theft problem. I've been paying for your landscaping business for months without realizing it." The effect was immediate and devastating. Derek's face went white as his guests turned to stare at him, understanding dawning in their expressions. His boss, a stern-looking man in an expensive suit, stepped away from Derek like he was radioactive. "Water theft?" one of the potential investors asked, his voice sharp with disgust. "You've been stealing water to run your business?" Derek tried to deny it, but the evidence was literally being dug up around him. The water company workers had found multiple connection points, documenting a theft operation that had been running for months. The numbers were staggering: over 15,000 gallons of stolen water, representing thousands of dollars in theft from multiple victims. As Derek's professional and social life imploded around him, I felt a satisfaction deeper than anything I'd experienced in years. This wasn't just revenge, it was justice. Every person who had been victimized by Derek's operation would get restitution, and every potential future victim would be protected. But as I stood there watching Derek's world crumble, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The 3 men who had arrived separately, the ones who looked like Derek's crew, were no longer mixing casually with the party guests. They were grouped together near the back fence, and they were staring directly at me with expressions that were anything but friendly. One of them was talking urgently into a cell phone, never taking his eyes off me. Another had his hand inside his jacket in a way that made my survival instincts scream warnings. These weren't just landscaping contractors or water thieves. These were dangerous men, and I had just destroyed their operation in the most public way possible. As the water company workers continued documenting evidence and Derek's guests fled the scene in embarrassment and disgust, I realized that my perfect revenge had just painted a target on my back. The water theft was apparently just the tip of the iceberg, and now these men knew exactly who had brought down their entire operation. Derek caught my eye across the chaos of his ruined party, and the look he gave me was pure hatred mixed with something that looked disturbingly like pity. He mouthed something I couldn't quite make out, but the gesture he made across his throat was unmistakable. I had won this battle, but I was about to discover that the war was just beginning. The Water War. Part 3. That night, I didn't sleep. How could I? Every shadow outside my window looked like a threat. Every sound made my heart race. Derek's party had ended in complete disaster. Guests fleeing, his boss firing him on the spot, and the water company documenting enough evidence to press serious criminal charges. But those 3 dangerous-looking men haunted my thoughts. The way they'd stared at me, the threat in Derek's gesture, it all pointed to something much darker than simple water theft. Around 2 a.m., I heard a car door slam outside. My blood turned to ice as I peeked through my blinds and saw Derek standing in his driveway, but he wasn't alone. The 3 men from the party were with him, plus 2 others I didn't recognize. They were having what looked like a heated argument, gesturing angrily at my house. I grabbed my phone and started recording through the window. If something happened to me, at least there would be evidence. But as I watched, one of the men handed Derek what looked like a thick envelope. Money. Derek shook his head repeatedly, pointing at my house, but the man with the envelope grabbed Derek's shirt and pulled him close, speaking directly into his face. Whatever was said made Derek go completely still. He took the envelope, nodded once, and the group dispersed. Derek went into his house, but the other men got back in their car and drove slowly past my house. The driver turned to stare directly at my bedroom window, and even in the darkness, I could see him smile. I was in serious trouble, and I knew. In the rest of the night crawled by in a haze of paranoia and terror. I found myself checking every lock multiple times, positioning kitchen knives within reach, even drafting an email to my sister explaining everything in case I disappeared. The woman who had confidently orchestrated Derek's public humiliation just hours earlier was now jumping at every creak in the house. By dawn, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to cower in my house waiting for these men to make their move. I needed information, allies, and most importantly, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. If Derek was just a pawn in something bigger, then maybe he could be turned into an asset instead of an enemy. Sunday morning brought a knock at my door that made my stomach drop. Through the peephole, I could see Derek standing on my porch, looking like he hadn't slept either. But something was different about him. Gone was the arrogant confidence I was used to. He looked defeated, scared even, and he kept glancing over his shoulder like he was being watched. Against my better judgment, I opened the door but kept the chain lock engaged. "Sophia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to talk. It's not safe for either of us anymore." "What do you mean not safe? You're the one who was stealing from me." Derek glanced over his shoulder nervously again. "The water thing, that was small time compared to what these guys are really doing. You have no idea what you've stumbled into. Then explain it to me." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Can I come in? Please, if they see me talking to you out here?" Every instinct told me not to let him in, but the fear in his voice was genuine. There was something broken about Derek now, a desperation, that made him seem more human than the arrogant neighbor I'd been plotting against for weeks. I closed the door, removed the chain, and opened it again. Derek stepped inside quickly, immediately moving away from the windows. "The water theft was never my idea," he began, pacing my living room like a caged animal. "These guys, they approached me about 6 months ago, said they had a business opportunity, needed someone with a clean record and a good property to use as a base. So you volunteered to steal from your neighbors? It wasn't supposed to be stealing. They told me they had contracts with the water company, that we were part of some pilot program for water distribution efficiency. I thought it was legitimate until… Until what? Derek stopped pacing and looked directly at me. Until I realized the water we were redistributing wasn't just going to landscaping clients. Sophia, they're running something much bigger. The water theft was just funding for their real operation. A chill ran down my spine. What real operation? I don't know all the details, but I've seen things. Heard conversations. They're using the water access points we set up to tap into more than just water lines. They're accessing data cables, security systems, even gas lines in some neighborhoods. The water theft was just the cover story. The implications hit me like a truck. They're running some kind of infrastructure hacking operation? Corporate espionage, identity theft, maybe worse. The houses they target aren't random. They're all owned by people who work for specific companies, government contractors, people with access to valuable information. My mind raced as the pieces fell into place. The careful selection of properties, the sophisticated equipment I'd seen them installing, the way they'd operated with such precision and confidence. This wasn't just theft. It was organized crime on a massive scale. Derek, what companies are we talking about? He pulled out his phone and showed me a list of addresses. I recognized several from our neighborhood, including 2 houses belonging to people I knew worked for defense contractors and one whose owner was a city planning official. But there were dozens more addresses I didn't recognize, scattered across multiple zip codes. My God, I whispered. How many people are they targeting? At least 50 properties that I know of, maybe more. They've been building this network for over 2 years, long before they recruited me. I was just supposed to be another access point, another way to legitimize their presence in residential areas. Derek, this is huge. We need to call the FBI. We can't. His voice was flat, hopeless. Sophia, these aren't just petty criminals. Yesterday, after your stunt at the party, they made it very clear what happens to people who interfere with their operation. What do you mean? He pulled up a news article on his phone with shaking hands. Remember my neighbor 2 streets over, the one who complained about suspicious activity in his yard last month? They found his body yesterday morning. Apparent suicide, according to the police report. My legs went weak. I sank onto my couch, staring at the headline. You're saying they killed him? I'm saying that after he started asking questions about his water bill. After he called the city about unauthorized digging in his yard, he suddenly decided to hang himself in his garage, left a note about financial troubles and depression. Very convenient. The room felt like it was spinning. What had started as simple revenge against a water thief had somehow evolved into a life-or-death situation involving corporate espionage and murder. Every decision I'd made, every move in my carefully planned revenge had been leading to this moment. What do they want from us? I asked, my voice barely steady. From me? To disappear. Take their money and relocate somewhere far away where I can't testify against them. They've got a whole relocation package ready. New identity, cash settlement, the works. Derek's voice cracked. From you? I think they want to make an example. Show other potential witnesses what happens when you interfere with their business. So what do we do? I don't know. I've been trying to figure that out all night. If I run, they'll probably let me go, but they'll definitely kill you. If I stay and try to help you, they'll kill us both. If we go to the police, we're assuming the police aren't already compromised. Despite everything Derek had done to me, despite months of theft and deception, I could see he was struggling with genuine moral conflict. Whatever threats these men had made, they'd scared him badly enough to consider risking his life to warn me. There has to be something we can do, I said. Some evidence we can gather, someone we can contact who can help. Derek shook his head. Sophia, you don't understand. These guys have been planning this for years. They have contacts inside the police department, the water company, probably the FBI too. The only reason they haven't killed us already is because your social media posts made it too public. Too obvious. That's when inspiration struck. Derek, what if we used that publicity to our advantage? What do you mean? You said they can't move against us openly because too many people are watching now. So what if we make sure even more people are watching? What if we document everything and make it so public that they can't touch us without exposing themselves? 4. The first time since he'd arrived, Derek looked hopeful. You want to go to war with these people using social media? I want to go to war with them using everything we have. Social media, traditional media, law enforcement agencies they don't control, federal authorities. We make this so big, so public, that they have no choice but to disappear. Derek was quiet for a long moment, thinking. It's dangerous. If we're wrong about their connections, if they can silence the story, then we're dead anyway. At least, this way we're fighting back. Okay, he said finally. But we need to be smart about this. Document everything, create multiple backups, send copies to journalists, law enforcement, anyone who might be able to help. We spent the next several hours planning our counterattack. Derek provided me with photos he'd secretly taken of the sea, equipment installations, recorded conversations with the crew leaders, even financial records showing payments for the various properties they'd compromised. The man had been more observant than I'd given him credit for, documenting everything out of fear and self-preservation. The scope of their operation was staggering. Over 24 homes in our immediate area had been infiltrated, with victims, including a cybersecurity consultant, several government employees, and executives from major corporations. The water theft had generated enough revenue to fund sophisticated hacking equipment and bribe local officials to look the other way. But the most shocking revelation came when Derek showed me intercepted communications between the crew leaders. They weren't just stealing data. They were selling access to foreign intelligence services, corporate secrets, government contractor information, even personal data that could be used for blackmail. The water theft ring was actually a front for what amounted to domestic terrorism. Derek, this is treason, I said, staring at the evidence spread across my dining room table. These people aren't just criminals, they're enemy agents. I know. That's why I'm so scared. These aren't the kind of people who just disappear when you expose them. These are the kind of people who eliminate threats permanently. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. By Sunday evening, we had assembled a comprehensive case file that would destroy their entire network. We had photos, recordings, financial documents, even a detailed map of all the compromised properties. Our plan was to release everything simultaneously across multiple platforms: social media, news outlets, federal law enforcement, and congressional offices. But as we prepared to upload the final batch of evidence, Derek's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and went pale. It's them. Don't answer it. If I don't answer, they'll assume the worst. He accepted the call and put it on speaker. Derek, a gravelly voice said, I hope you've had time to think about our conversation last night. I'm still considering your offer. Good, because we've been watching your neighbor's house today, and it looks like you two have been having quite the friendship session. I hope you're not doing anything foolish. My blood ran cold. They'd been watching us all day, probably had cameras positioned around my property, maybe even listening devices, everything we'd planned, everything we'd discussed. They probably already knew about. We're just talking, Derek said, his voice steady despite the sweat beading on his forehead. Talking about what exactly? Derek looked at me, and I could see him making a decision that would determine both our fates. About how sorry she is for causing trouble yesterday. She understands now that it was all a misunderstanding. Excellent. Then you won't mind if we come by to discuss her formal apology in person. We'll be there in 10 minutes. The line went dead. Derek and I stared at each other in terror. They're coming here, he whispered. How much of our evidence did we upload already? About half. The rest is ready to go, but we need more time. We don't have more time. I frantically started uploading files to every platform I could think of, my fingers flying across my laptop keyboard. Derek was doing the same on his phone, sending copies to journalists, FBI field offices, even his ex-wife who worked for a newspaper in another state. That's when I heard car doors slamming outside. Through my window, I could see 3 cars parked in front of my house. At least 6 men were walking toward my front door, and they weren't trying to look friendly anymore. These weren't the casual contractors I'd seen at Derek's party. These were professionals, moving with military precision. Derek grabbed my arm. "Back door. We run now." But as we reached my kitchen, I could see more men positioning themselves in my backyard. We were surrounded, trapped in my own home with nowhere to run. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by heavy pounding. "Sophia Martinez," a voice called out. "We just want to talk. Open the door and no one gets hurt." Derek and I looked at each other, both knowing this was it. Our evidence was half uploaded, our escape routes were blocked, and the most dangerous criminals we'd ever encountered were about to break down my door. "The uploads," I whispered. "Are they still running?" Derek checked his phone. 30% complete. We need more time." The pounding grew more insistent, and I could hear the sound of my front door frame beginning to splinter. They weren't going to wait much longer for us to cooperate, but as the sound of breaking wood echoed through my house, I grabbed my phone and did the only thing left that might save us. I started a live video stream. "Hello, everyone," I said, staring directly into my phone's camera as my front door finally gave way. "My name is Sophia Martinez, and if something happens to me in the next few minutes, this is who you need to investigate." I held up photos of the men who had been at Derek's party, the evidence we'd compiled, everything that would expose their operation. The live stream was broadcasting to Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok simultaneously, reaching hundreds of viewers in real time. "These men are part of a corporate espionage ring that's been targeting our neighborhood," I continued, as heavy footsteps approached my living room. "They've murdered at least one person, and they're here to kill me and Derek Morrison to cover up their crimes." The first man appeared in my doorway, and his face went white when he saw my phone pointing at him. In the age of social media, even professional killers had to worry about going viral. "Turn off the camera," he said, his voice calm but deadly. "No," I replied, keeping the phone steady. "Everyone watching this, screenshot these faces, share this video, don't let them bury this story." The viewer count was climbing rapidly. 50, then 100, then 200 people watching live as armed men invaded my home. Comments were flooding in, people asking if this was real, others saying they were calling police. "Ma'am, you're making this very difficult," the man said, taking a step closer. "Good," I replied. "Derek, tell them about the operation." Derek appeared beside me on camera, his face pale but determined. "My name is Derek Morrison. These men forced me to help them steal water and hack into people's homes. They're selling information to foreign agents. They killed Robert Chen on Maple Street last month." The lead man cursed and spoke into a radio. "We have a problem. Live broadcast, multiple platforms, hundreds of viewers." A voice crackled back. "Abort, get out now." But it was too late. I could hear sirens in the distance getting closer. Someone watching the stream had called 911, probably multiple people. The men looked at each other uncertainly. Their clean operation suddenly turned into a public relations nightmare. "This isn't over," the lead man said, backing toward my broken front door. "Yes, it is," I replied, still filming. "Everyone can see your faces now. Everyone knows what you've done. Run all you want. You'll never be safe." The men fled my house just as police cars arrived, their sirens wailing. But the damage was done. The live stream had been viewed over 1,000 times, shared hundreds more, and automatically saved to multiple platforms. Even if they killed Derek and me now, the evidence would survive. As police officers surrounded my house and paramedics checked us for injuries, I realized that my simple revenge against a water thief had accidentally uncovered and destroyed one of the largest domestic espionage operations in recent history. Derek and I spent the next 6 hours giving statements to FBI agents, providing evidence, and identifying the men who had tried to silence us. Within days, arrests were made across multiple states, millions of dollars in stolen data was recovered, and dozens of victims finally got answers about their mysterious utility bills and privacy breaches. But the most satisfying moment came at each week later, when I received my first normal water bill in 8 months. $63. For the first time in months, I was paying only for the water I actually used. Derek moved away a month later, relocating through the Federal Witness Protection Program. But before he left, he knocked on my door one last time. "I'm sorry," he said, simply. "For all of it. You saved both our lives." "You helped save them too," I replied. "In the end, you did the right thing." As I watched him drive away, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's turning them into allies and destroying something much bigger together. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.